I never saw myself here, penning about the years I felt as a shadow in my own family. Actually, though, I felt exactly like I was, that of a filler in the background, growing up. No, my parents straightforward told me they wished they only had one child, my twin sister Lily. I am not talking about the usual "I was an accident" kind of unwanted. Indeed, they said it as if I were a mistake brought along with her. I was meant to be the additional bonus kid. It was disorganized. My twin sister Lily shone right from the beginning. She was charming, beautiful, intelligent, athletic, everything they had ever dreamed of in a daughter. She had everything. Her own room with ideal pink curtains, a duvet inspired by Disney, and toy shelves. While I was simply the extra kid who didn't really matter, she was their little princess. My room? It was small and packed with an ancient, noisy bed and a dresser that appeared to have originated in the 1970s. It seemed like I didn't even exist every morning when I heard my parents discuss how thrilled they were to get Lily new clothing or take her to gymnastics. Should they acknowledge me, it was merely to advise me to keep out of the path. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" they would ask, and it felt as though school was no better. I was just a hassle. One parent-teacher meeting comes to mind when my parents insisted on Lily acting as the future Picasso and complimenting her finger drawings nonstop. My report card was turned over and disregarded in the meantime. Not even did they glance at it. I put a lot of effort into my studies, hoping perhaps if I performed sufficiently, they might find me. They didn't, however. I was the invisible one. Lily was the golden child with everything. Fresh clothes, fresh toys, and even first-choice supper cuisine. I had hand-me-downs from hardly known cousins. And the Christmases? Lily would be showered with gifts, while I would have one or two items, just enough to enable them to claim they bought something. It wasn't only about the stuff either. I watched her unwrap her presents, forcing a grin, trying to ignore it. But it bothered me. Lily's objects were holy. She would scream, and my parents would rush to defend her if I so much touched one of her dolls. I would be corrected for invading her space. Like the villain in her universe, I was mealtime served as still another battlefield. Lily consistently ate the best chicken piece or the largest slice of pizza. The only person who ever made me feel like I cared was my grandfather. I would receive the leftovers, and if I complained, my mom would give me this look and say, "Be grateful you're getting anything at least." Like I was some charity case they were compelled to feed. He handled me as though I were not invisible. Every weekend, I would visit his place, and we would fish or relax on the porch as he related stories about his early years. I felt normal for a few hours every week, as though I were valuable. But he soon started to feel ill. The disease is cancer. And once more, my folks excluded me. Lily was brought to see him, but I was constantly advised to stay home. I started slipping out to see him by myself, knowing it was only another excuse. They said I had to help around the house. We would chat, and he would try to make me happy by praising my strength. Yet, I could see the anxiety in his eyes. It seemed as though all I had left was taken away when he died. Lily was handled like the bereaved daughter at the burial. I was put to the back and ignored, not even asked whether I was okay by my parents. Their preoccupation with ensuring Lily was okay kept them too busy. After the death of my grandfather, things only grew worse. I felt more alone than ever. The little attention I had previously evaporated totally. I felt as though I was ghostly disappearing into the walls from inside my house. Sitting at the dinner table, I felt as though they were speaking to Lily, as though I were not even present. Pictures of families? Looking through them, you will discover plenty of images showing either just my elbow or the back of my head. Should someone peruse our family album, they would not even be aware of my existence. The bitterness grew. When I started talking to my parents about why I never had anything fresh like Lily did, my mom would dismiss me. "Lily has her activities and events. You're fine with what you have." Should I press further, she would tell me I was being self-serving. I learned then to remain silent, to fit in, to disappear. Still, my dad's comments would strike me like a slap in the face even as I tried to vanish. Like I was the problem merely for being, he would ask, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Lily was naturally all too delighted to participate. She understood how to work with my parents. She would put on the waterworks anytime she wanted something, and they would dash to her side. It made no difference how hard I tried. I was never going to be their favorite. Years of searching for answers for my problems and the reason I couldn't be what they desired. At night, I would lie awake staring at the ceiling and wish I could simply vanish. By the time I turned 16, I thought, all right, I'm halfway to freedom. I counted down the days until I could legally go and finally make something of myself, since, in their views, that was all I was, a problem they didn't know how to address. But I was ready for nothing that was to follow. I had always known my family liked Lily, so what occurred next was worse than anything I had ever imagined. It felt like the universe was laughing at me when Lily got pregnant at 16. Though I have no idea exactly how it happened, it did. And my parents? They seemed hardly disturbed at all. They were ecstatic, just as though she had taken home a prize. They cried, "We're going to be grandparents." Confused and disappointed, I stood there wondering whether they had lost their sense of reason. Lily and her partner had a shotgun wedding, and everything felt so hurried it seemed like they were aiming for some kind of record. I was sitting in my room, the only place I could find some quiet one day, and they were ordering me to get ready for a wedding. Not that my opinion ever counted. No one even asked whether I was comfortable with any of this. A few weeks later, my mother summoned me downstairs, smiling. I felt that smile. It was the one she usually carried with her before giving news I would not have liked. They would need extra space, she informed me, given Lily's baby on her way. All right, maybe they were going to rearrange something? Not so sure, though. She unleashed the nuclear device. We need your room for the baby, my room. One area of this house that I owned, albeit tiny and unappealing. It was the only location where I could momentarily pretend as though everything was under control. I was being booted out now to make space for Lily's baby. When I tried to argue, my mom simply shrugged. I was 16 and you're old enough to figure it out on your own. How was I expected to work that out? They were not concerned, even though they knew I had nowhere to go. That evening, I packed my belongings, well, what little I had, then departed the house. They simply needed a place for the new golden child. There was no decision available to me. At 16, my parents treated me as an annoyance. From the garage, I picked an old tent and erected it in the yard. Though hardly much, it was all I had. I could hear the chilly evenings in the house, laughing, baby planning, etc. I was outside freezing, acting as though it didn't affect me. Winter arrived, and things grew much worse. Bundled in every layer I could locate, it had no effect. Still trying to keep up with school, I completed my assignments using a flashlight and was having declining marks. And my parents? It was difficult for me to concentrate on algebra while I was chilly and wondering whether I would survive the night. Not barely noticed was their lack. Redecorating my room and transforming it into Lily's baby's nursery consumed too much time. I was simply a ghost. I soon had a realization. They hardly gave me any thought. They never had. The fact sank in slowly not too long ago. I was nothing, not something my parents considered at all. I had spent my entire life trying to grab their attention and be something they would value, but they never even looked long enough to see me. The worst thing was that all I had now was an old tent in the backyard, far colder than I had ever imagined. They hardly gave a damn about my being out there. I heard them in the house every night, laughing, chatting, and organizing everything around Lily's infant. I was outdoors, trying my best not to freeze to death. I could hear the TV through the window, the sound of them having dinner. I was rather near the house. They seemed to be passing for me not existing. They never questioned whether I was okay or came outside to see me. I started to wonder whether they were correct all along, that I was simply a problem, since I was the child they had thrown out, the one who didn't matter. Perhaps I was never supposed to blend in with them or be a member of their family. I thought I was starting to go invisible, not only in their perspective, but also from the viewpoint of the globe. Though it was difficult, I tried not to let it define me. I would stroll around the neighborhood, seeing families together laughing and spending time with one another, and I would simply feel a great weight in my chest. Why not I could have that? Why could I not be involved in something real? I could, however, afford to remain mired in that gloom. I have to keep on moving. Seeking to make any kind of survival possible, I began taking odd jobs throughout the area, showing lawns, clearing snow, anything else. Though hardly much, it was better than nothing. It was a means of feeling as though I was doing anything, really. I refused to lie down and die out there. Still, I was unsure about my next action, even with all that. I couldn't simply live in a tent, expecting things would improve. One day, I was strolling past a bakery. Though I had seen it a million times before, tonight was different. Usually, I was not hungry, but for some reason I found myself just standing there, staring at the display window. My gut growled at the scent of freshly cooked bread and pastries. I looked to be a disaster. I understood. I hadn't eaten a decent dinner in days, and my clothes were old. Though I assumed the proprietor would overlook me, an elderly man called Frank emerged from the bakery. He was a tough-looking man whose voice sounded as though it had gone through a lot. "Was I searching for a job?" he asked. I was first taken off guard. I told him I would do anything. I hadn't really been expecting someone to truly offer me a job, but I wouldn't let this opportunity pass by. He indicated he wanted someone to assist with floor sweeping, delivery, and cleanup. Not glitzy, but it was money. Perfectly still, he tossed some day-old bread. I thought I had struck the lottery. Whether the work was difficult mattered not to me. Whether I had to get up at dawn was not important. Simply survival was what I desired. The first day was terrible. I had to be there before the sun even rose, so I got up at 4 a.m., then darkly making my way to work. But the warmth hit me as I walked through that door, and for the first time in weeks, I felt as though I could breathe. Though it wasn't easy, scrubbing floors, lifting big bags of flour, wiping fallen dough, I didn't mind. I was doing something. That was plenty. Frank showed me what needed to be done and how to do it well, even though he wasn't particularly friendly and fuzzy. Frank began opening to me over time. There was no place for slinking. He related to me how he had started the bakery from nothing when his dad kicked him out when he was my age. He had worked assiduously to get where he was, and I believe he sensed some of himself in me. He even showed me how to cook a few basic pastries and offered me financial guidance. Frank gave me something I never expected a few weeks into the job, a room above the bakery. It seemed as though he was attempting to educate me on how to survive, in life as much as in the bakery. It was not much, a small storage room with a bed and a window that hardly opened, but it was a major step from the tent, a roof over my head. I was quite appreciative. That evening, I shifted my stuff. I had slept better in months than this. For the first time in eternity, I felt safe. I pushed myself into the job, knowing that, should Frank be giving me an opportunity, I should work my ass out to count. I learned how to bake bread and knead dough, and how to make a decent apple pie by whipping. Frank wasn't always the easiest man to chat to, but when I did anything correctly, he would nod, groan, and maybe even offer a little compliment. Though it didn't seem like much, to me, it meant everything. One day, following a shift, Frank sat down with me. His expression was austere, and I knew I was in hot water. My heart stopped, though, as he handed me an envelope. When I opened it, it was my first pay, a legitimate salary rather than merely cash taken undercover. Though it was not riches, it was the first actual money I had made on my own. I thought I was at last headed ahead. Though life, as usual, wasn't done tossing curveballs at me yet, I felt like I was genuinely starting to construct something for myself. For the first time in a long time. I felt the weight of everything, even with a roof over my head and consistent employment. I would see families enter the bakery, parents with children selecting goodies, laughing, going through life. It brought to mind all I lacked. Frank saw me struggle with it. I couldn't help but consider how my family had kicked me out and left me to fend for myself while strangers treated me with more care than they had ever done. Simple, but it stuck with me. You either let life beat you, or you get up and beat it back. I refused to let the gloom swallow me. I had to keep on demanding. Though deep down I knew it wouldn't be easy, I was not going to be that lost, invisible youngster longer. I could not spend endless years in the bakery. I have to start seeing more broadly. Though it had been a lifeline, I soon came to see that the bakery was not going to be my endgame. Living above a little, peaceful bakery in a town where everyone knew my tale, I could not stay there indefinitely. Frank had handed me a job, a home over my head, and an opportunity to stand on my own 2 feet. But I realized I needed more. Frank had always advised me, little bits of wisdom here and there. I couldn't just exist. I wanted to create a life for myself free from dependency on anybody else. He would reply, "You make your own luck," or "You work hard and you get ahead." Simple as that stayed with me and made me consider my next actions. I could not simply work in the bakery and hope it would last me through life. I have to start considering long-term. As I worked, I came to see I needed more than simply odd jobs to really advance. So I began picking extra shifts. After leaving the bakery, I started evening work at a convenience shop. I would do everything to earn a little more cash. On weekends, I even started assisting with landscaping, grass cutting, hedge trimming, whatever I could do to earn enough money to keep ahead. Although some days I was dead on my feet and the task was exhausting, it seemed like I was at last acting morally. I was creating something, not only living now. Living like this was not easy, but it was honest work and mine. It was not glitzy. Juggling employment and trying to save every dime, I hardly slept, but every day seemed like I was advancing still another step. One day, I will not have to live under the shadow of my history, I kept reminding myself. One day, I would not be that unwelcome child with just a tent for home. I set myself on a path out of that loop. Though things weren't all smooth sailing, I continued working, kept pushing, and kept staring toward the prize. Days when I felt as though I was being tugged in 100 different directions. Although juggling 3 jobs was challenging, I managed to find time to visit the library using the free Wi-Fi in search of new prospects. I understood I couldn't remain mired permanently. Frank had set the stage, but it was up to me to move forward. I began to see the little triumphs about that time. I was beginning to set aside money. Though not wealthy, I was making do. Once I had enough saved, I began to create a future schedule, considering what I could do. Perhaps I could locate a better place to live, land a more steady job, and begin to create a true future. But every time I felt I was headed forward, something would bring back my past. I would pass families, or even just groups of people out together, and it would strike me like a stone to the chest. Not to get bitter was difficult. I was still alone, following all my family had gone through and all they had taken from me. I would remind myself that it was useless now, all the times I had tried to reach out to them, tried to make them see me, tried to be a part of their life, and how they just shut me out, over and over again. That was not the youngster who needed them anymore. Not that 16-year-old without direction, camping in a tent and begging for an opportunity. Right now, I was working on it alone. Sometimes, though, when I would get home late from work, I would glance around at the little room I had rented above the bakery, at the low light and the aged furniture, and it felt as though I hadn't truly fled the past. I hadn't escaped the sensation of being unwanted or ignored. Then, one day, out of the blue, I got a call. It came from a neighborhood real estate agent. They had a little house that would be ideal for me and had heard I was seeking a place. Though I had no idea whether it was a sign or a fluke, I grabbed the opportunity. Walking through that door, I found it unbelievable. Though it was little, just a 3-bedroom house on the outskirts of town, it was mine. I could not even explain the sensation of going through the front door for the first time, standing in the empty living room with nothing but naked walls. I had enough saved up from all the hard work I had been doing that I could finally buy a property. Mine was it. From me, nobody could get it. Nobody could convince me I belonged nowhere. I was no longer some undesirable child. I had something to show for all the effort, all the battle, and all the time I'd spent trying to make it. At the beginning, I had not even had much to occupy the house. It was me, an air mattress on the floor, and some cardboard boxes for furniture. Still, that was of little relevance. That was all I needed. I had somewhere. The furniture arrived gradually, piece by piece. I spent the first few weeks simply adjusting to the concept of having something of my own, something not connected to the past, something all mine. From a secondhand store, a couch, a low-priced dining table. The place began to come together little by bit. Still, something felt strange even as the place filled up. Although I had created this life for me, I knew deep down it was still under development. Not done with me was my family. Having not heard from them in some time, I reasoned maybe, just maybe, they had finally left me alone. Still, I ought to have known better. Those that enjoy that do not just walk away. Sure enough, it occurred. One evening, I heard a knock on the door. They always come back. Nobody else was expected of me. I assumed it was most likely a delivery or even one of the neighbors dropping by. I froze, though, when I opened the door. There they were, from my parents. Her husband, Lily, together with their 3 children, are all standing on my porch as though nothing had ever occurred. Like they hadn't kicked me out, like they hadn't regarded me as invisible for all those years. First to talk was my mother. "Surprises," she added with that smile, the one I had learned to despise. "We heard you purchased a house. We really are proud of you." I just stood there, heart thumping in my chest. I wasn't sure whether to allow them in or bang the door in their faces. Part of me wanted to yell, to tell them all I had been storing over all these years. Another side of me, though, was simply numb. Lily pushed her way past me, her infant in her arms, as though she owned the space. "Good place, buddy. It dawned on me that you have truly done well for yourself. Not a visit here. They were here with a purpose, always they were. Not actually. They had never given me any thought. They were not interested in my staying in a tent and working tirelessly to start a life. We were thinking, with Lily's family growing and you having this large house to yourself, maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones." And when my dad spoke, I could hear the same entitlement, the same control he'd always tried to have over me. Family should keep together then? Right then, I realized I wouldn't be backtracking. Not this time either. I could not believe what was happening. They could not simply walk back into my life when it would be convenient for them. Not after everything they had put me through. After all the years of neglecting me, pushing me out and making me feel like nothing had ever happened. My parents were there at my door, behaving as though everything was fine. Still sporting that smile that had always made my stomach flip, my mom added, "We heard you bought a house," while I stood there staring at them, trying to retain my cool and figure out what the hell was going on. "We are rather proud of you." Proud? Happy of me? Following all they have done? Now they were acting like they had been there the whole time, like they had supported me in some capacity after kicking me out when I was 16 and neglecting me all my life. Though I pushed it back, I felt a surge of wrath. I wasn't going to let them see me like that. Lily passed me, pressing ahead as if she ruled the place. She gazed at the door as though she were evaluating it while she held her infant in her arms. "Good place, buddy." I wanted to yell at her, tell her she had no right to be here, that she had no idea what it had taken to get to this point. But you really did well for yourself. Her voice was dripping with artificial sweetener. Still, I held it in. That's when I heard my dad's voice, not going to satisfy them. "Son, we were thinking, well, with Lily's family growing and all, and you having this big house to yourself, maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones." He cleared his throat, trying to seem all authoritative. Family should hang together, right? My ears let me wonder incredulously. Family, after all they had subjected me to, following their treatment of me as if I were expendable, they wanted to stick together now? It amounted to a slap in the face. They were here because they needed something. They were not here because they loved me. I bit my tongue, pushing myself to remain cool, not allowing them to walk all over me once more. "Really, what are you asking for?" My mother's smile faltered for just a moment, but then she pushed forward with a steady but tight voice. "Well, we reasoned, wouldn't it be great if we all moved in here? One large, joyful family, as in old times." My heart dropped into my stomach. They would like to move in, exactly as such. I had nothing to say about it. This was my abode, my space, the one place I had worked on alone all year long. I was not some charity case. I was not going to allow them to make my house into their backup plan. They decided they wanted to be a family again. I remarked, my voice stern this time. "That's not happening." My mother's face contorted, and for a moment I felt terrible. But the thrill disappeared when I suddenly recalled what they had done. She did not give me any thought. Her sole concern was getting what she desired. She started to say something, but I cut her off. "No, it's not happening," I said again. "My house is here. I put in work for it." The room went quiet as I made this on my own, and you are not here to pick it from me. Red with wrath, my dad stared at me. Like he was aiming to scare me into backing down, he expanded his chest as though he were about to act. But that fearful youngster had changed. Not the one that would shrink when he spoke up. My dad said, "Look," standing straight and squarely facing him, "you're a young man now." His voice grew. "It is time you begin to answer for yourself. Responsibility? Rich coming from him is what I mean. The man who kicked me out treated me like I was nothing but a burden. You want me to take responsibility?" "I was going to allow him to get away with this," I shot back, my voice trembling with rage now. "You kicked me out when I was 16. While you all played happy families, you left me out there empty-handed. Wherein then was my responsibility?" They said nothing at all for a moment. Like he couldn't understand why I was pushing back, my dad's face turned into a mix of wrath and perplexity. Still, I didn't give a damn. Lily naturally tried to play the victim. I was not backing down this time. She slanted her head, her face covered in that false wounded look she used every time she sought to control someone. She responded, "Come on," moving ahead with that infant still in her arms. "Steer clear of selfish behavior. We require that space. You owe us as well." I nearly laughed. "I owe you." The words burned in my lips. "I owe you nothing at all. When I was 16, you and Mom kicked me out. You left me to work on it alone. And today, after all this time, you believe I owe you? Not yes. I saw it then. You cannot waltz back into my life and grab what is mine." They were staring at me as though I were not simply some child under control for the first time. My dad tightened his teeth and went redder. Though it wasn't going to work this time, I could see him fighting to control the fury. Not with me. My mother tried one more, her voice softer now, as if she were guilt-tripping me into performing what she desired. She said, gazing at me like I was meant to instantly forgive everything, "We know we have made mistakes. Still, we are working to rectify things. The last straw was just our yearning to be a family once more. I could not keep back anymore." "You now want to be a family?" My voice rising with all the years of bitterness and anger I had kept buried, I asked. "Now that I have something you wish for? Where were you when I was tent sleeping? Where were you when I most needed you?" The quiet, thick and heavy spread out between us. My folks knew nothing about how to react. There was no return for them. After a few minutes that seemed like hours, my dad turned to go without any justification. His shoulders dropped, his resentment still boiling under the surface. Still clinging to whatever notion she had of righting things, my mother sought one last word in. "We just want to correct things," she stated. "We just want to be a family." I shook my head, my voice calm but frigid. "No. You got your chance. You rejected me. You gave me treatment like I was nothing. Now is convenient. Hence, you cannot walk back into my life. I've progressed, and you have to too." They stayed there for a second more, as though they were incredulous at what they were hearing. Eventually, though, they turned and headed back to their car without another word. It was finished. I stood there, my hand clutching the door, my chest tight with both relief and wrath. For now, nevertheless. But something changed within me. Invisible child, I was not particularly afraid anymore. I was determined not to let them rule me, neither now nor ever again. This is my residence. This was life. I slammed the door behind me, feeling the weight of all I had been carrying for so long release off my shoulders. I was not about to let anyone take it away from me. I'd finished. I was going to be their punching bag less often. I intended not to let them define me. I felt for the first time in my life that I could shape my own fate, and it felt fantastic. I would like to tell you that when they went, it was the end of it, that I could at last move on knowing I had set my foot down and defended myself. But life doesn't always go that way, particularly given that you have been dealing with poisonous individuals for as long as I have. A few weeks passed just when I felt I could at last breathe. They managed to re-enter my life. I felt my work was finished. I felt I had made it very evident that they belonged nowhere in my life now. I mumbled. Dead exhausted from the lengthy bakery job and then the extra hours at the convenience shop, I arrived home from work one afternoon. I spotted an official-looking envelope in my mailbox as I was heading up to my door. I first paid little attention to it, perhaps a bill or other obligation I had to handle, but I froze the minute I opened it. A legal notification, a horrible legal notice. At first, my thoughts couldn't understand my sister's contention that my house should be shared as family property, thereby challenging possession of it. How could they go about this? After everything, after I had worked so hard to get this far, they were trying to claim it from me? My hands shaking, I stood in my driveway, staring at the letter like a hit in the belly. Though I felt I was ready for anything, this was something different. I called a lawyer since I had no idea what to do and just performed the logical action. I wasn't going to let them grab what I had developed, neither now nor ever. The attorney I came across was tough. Karen was her name. Indeed, her name was quite sarcastic. She was correct when she quickly glanced at the letter and added, "They don't have a leg to stand on, but they'll try to make it a hassle for you." They hurled everything they could at me for the following several weeks. Accusations, falsehoods, you name it. They asserted I had bought the house with money they had given me and that I had somehow misled them and exploited their kindness. Naturally, all of it was a lie. Working hard and saving every dollar on my own, I had done jobs they would never have ever thought of doing. But they didn't care about the reality. Their concern was not on my diligence. From me, they simply wanted to steal everything. The worst of all is also that people in our little town, people I hadn't heard from in years, started phoning me, wondering why I was doing this, why I couldn't simply let my family in. You never know what they have done. Thus, I wanted to yell at them. You are ignorant of their treatment of me. I was not. I stayed silent. I realized I couldn't allow them to drag me back into their muck. Like they usually had, they were trying to make me the villain. But I was no more that terrified, broken child. Having done everything on my own, without their support, I decided I had had enough and refused to let them paint me as the evil guy. I wasn't going to watch them wreck what I had created. I told Karen to check the family's financial records, as I wanted to know just exactly how they felt they had any claim to my house. She just got to work. She did not probe. She called me into her office a few weeks later. She looked at me, one that suggested something major was approaching. "What did you find?" "My gut in knots," I inquired. She handed me a stack of papers. "You need to see this." It struck me like a goods train as I began sorting through the records. The one person in my life who had ever showered me with love, my grandfather, had given me an inheritance when he died. Quite sizable one. When I turned 18, the money was meant to go to me, but apparently my parents had managed to control it by means of some legal loophole. For years, they had been using that money to pay off debt, finance Lily's wedding, and even cover some of their new house purchase. All of it had been snatched from me without my awareness. I sat there going over the papers, my hands shaking. My fortune had been taken, and I had never known. I was furiously angry all around. Years of wondering why I was never good enough, why they always treated me like I was a burden. That was because I was a source of money. I was just meant for them to get what they desired. The worst of all is also that I was enraged as they used my money to live lavishly while letting me live in a nasty tent. Still, that rage provided the insight I needed. I was not going to let them off with this. From me, they had taken enough. Karen agreed when I was done. We had a strong argument. We intended to sue them for theft and dishonesty. Though it would not be simple, we had the data. The next 3 months were a flurry of meetings, documentation, and court appearances. I was not going to just watch them walk all over me anymore. Every time they opened their mouths, Karen would take out another paper, proving how they had siphoned off my fortune, how they had stolen from me. They tried everything to position me as the bad guy, stating I was unappreciative and that I didn't help. Their eyes showed it to me. Desperate they were getting. When the decision came down, I nearly found it unbelievable. I won before the judge decided. They owed me back off from whatever they took plus damages. As the judgment was read, I recall staring at the faces of my parents. Their way out of it was not one they could speak. They failed to spin the narrative. They came under fire. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt as though I was bearing the weight of the earth on my shoulders for the first time. I was also caught. Not only was my money being returned, I was finding my life returning. At last, I had taken charge. I will admit it felt amazing. I had battled for what was mine and won. It was a moment of pure delight when I watched my parents squirm and saw the truth at last emerge. Still more so, though, I felt liberated. Free from the guilt they had caused me to bear for years. Free from the disgrace they had tried to project on me. I had worked alone on it. After the decision, they sought to reach out to me since I had constructed this life, and nobody could take it from me. My dad called, stating they wanted to talk and wanted to apologize. My mom left voicemails. However, I showed no interest. I had made it plain that I was finished with them. I blocked their phones and carried on. Their apologies made no difference to me. Having been caught, they simply wanted to atone. I was not falling for it. Now I am concentrating on what is important. I live at home. I am employed. I created my life from the ground up. It is unique. Though I have a long path ahead, I am ready for it. Even if they are kin, I have discovered that sometimes the best thing you can do is distance yourself from the individuals who mistreated you. Kin is not about blood. It's about who shows up for you, who encourages you, and who treats you like less of an afterthought. Though I'm not sure what the future holds, I am not allowing anyone to take away what I have earned. Not anymore.